Hi, everybody. I'm Chris, and this is Board on the Floor. And today I wanted to talk a bit about something I said in my last video in regards to this new hobby and how I'm kind of like obsessed with it. And I think the term obsession often has negative connotations because obviously, if you were obsessed with a person, it could be pretty bad. But in regards to this, I think like it's kind of like a friendly obsession.
A friendly obsession.
And so at the beginning, I pretty much just got a game here or there, spent a couple weeks playing with it, and kind of found something interesting about it and looked for other games that were similar to it and kind of moved on. And then recently, I've been spending so much time reading about certain games. And obviously, the top 100 games on Board Game Geek are the types of games that probably everybody should be playing. I think in the last week I went a little too far in regards to the amount of games I added to my collection. So let me just slide this pile over and show you exactly what I mean. So I have about 6 new games and a few expansions that I ended up picking up in a 7-day period. Now, in my defense, some of these were purchased used. So I think it kind of evens it out in regards to, like the amount of money I ended up spending on it. Some of it wasn't so bad. Lost Ruins of Arnac, I think, is on everybody's list right now, something that everybody wants to add to their collection. And I found it very interesting because I'd been reading about how they were working on a solo campaign and they just happened to release it a few days ago. So there's a solo variant of this game, but there were also some like solo mini expansions that you could just print and play, like download off the website, print them yourself. And then the solo campaign is the same thing, where you could go on the website and download it and print it yourself and try it out with the game. And so I have it all ready. It's actually on the table right now over there, and I'm hoping to get to it as soon as I finish this video. But I didn't need, but I really wanted to have this in my collection. Thematically, I think the components and the design of the game itself really appealing, and so I had a good time with it. Everdale is obviously a game that everybody mentions. The game itself is beautiful. The Ever tree in the middle of the board is just great to look at, and it's engaging. And the theme is something that I thought, oh, my kids would be into it. But then, of course, as I started playing it, I realized it's a lot more complex than you would think with this kind of cutesy design. But down the road, I'm sure it would be something that they would be a lot more interested in just because of the way it looks. But this is a beautiful game. This is a challenging game, but I think it's a very rewarding game. And I'm very happy that I have it. I've only played it 2 or 3 times now and enjoyed every single one. But like most of the games I play, I always get it wrong at the beginning. And so I always fumble along and make tons of mistakes. And then I'm just like, why does it work this way? And I realize, oh, it doesn't work this way. I made a mistake going along and I misunderstood some of the rules. So I'm still grasping concepts of game mechanics, period. But these types of games I think are a lot more complex compared to the other games I played. Most of the games I started off with, and most of the games in my collection, are cooperative games. I like playing with other people, or not other people in reality, but other people within the game themselves. So like in the Arkham game where you have other investigators, you could play both of them at the same time. Or in Cthulhu Death May Die, same thing. You have two people that you play. And so these competitive games are very new to me, even though the first game I ever played was Terraforming Mars, which is a competitive worker placement kind of game. But the concepts of Terraforming Mars at the time when it was shown to me were way beyond anything I could really grasp. But now that I've spent a bit more time playing different types of games and working my way up to these more, complex rule sets, complex mechanics, I think I finally got a hold of how a lot of this works and how I can develop a strategy to start to play them. So far, I've enjoyed every game of Everdale that I played, and I'm looking forward to getting it to the table again and maybe diving into some of the expansions down the road. But for now, I'm quite happy with it. Cryo, I've already done a video about. This game, I just couldn't pass up because it was just so pretty. The design, the illustration, everything about it, I just love. I love looking at it. I love when it's on the table, and I love showing it to people. I've already gotten my wife to play it, and she enjoyed it. And I think if I start to have more game nights and invite people over, this might be a game that hits the table a lot more often than the other ones just because it's so beautiful. But similar to Everdale and Arnac, it is a competitive worker placement game. And so as you can see, thematically, I've been moving towards these more competitive games from the co-op games. And over the past week, I've purchased not just 3, but 4. I can't say so much about this because I haven't had a chance to play it yet. That's the problem with getting too many games too fast, is you honestly can't get them all to the table. But just going through the box, it is beautiful. Every component is meticulously designed. It feels so nice in your hands, from the little minis to the coins to even the board and the player mats themselves. They're double layered player mats, so it's just I love the amount of kind of detail and effort that goes into some of these games. And it makes them not just enjoyable to play, but enjoyable to look at. I've watched a few videos on it, I've read through the rule book, and so far I think this is probably the most complicated game I own. Now, whether or not it's going to be something that I feel is overwhelming to learn, I don't think so. Like, I think that breaking into these types of games through, I don't want to say that Arnac or Everdale or Cryo are easier games, but I think that their rule set and gameplay may be a bit more straightforward for someone like me. And so I think I avoided these types of games for a while and focused more on story driven cooperative games. But now that I've had a few playthroughs of a lot of these games, I'm realizing I'm very interested in these types of games. And so hopefully the next time I get to go back and play Terraforming Mars, I'll understand it more. I'll understand the mechanics, I'll understand the strategies, and I'll hopefully be able to do a better job of it than the first time. Next come a couple of games that I managed to find used, and people seem to be moving out of town and wanting to get rid of their collection, and so I am very lucky to be taking it from them and putting it into my collection. Lord of the Rings, Journeys in Middle-earth. It's the first app-driven board game I got, and so what that means is you actually have to have an app on your phone or your iPad or your computer to play this game properly. You can't play the game without the app. At first, I was like, I'm not sure if this is something I'm interested in, but I wanted to try it out. And so I got this to the table the other day, and I found it really interesting the way the app worked, the way you had to constantly go back and forth with it, and how it helped you kind of plan out the map and continue the story type thing. But the game itself was so hard, I lost both times I tried to play it very quickly in the first chapter, mostly because I didn't understand the rules and how the app worked in regards to successes versus hit points. And so every time I got a success, I put that into the app, but the app was actually asking me how many hits I get. So one success was 2 hits and 2 successes was 6 hits. So I was never able to defeat an enemy, and the threat level just went up so high that I kept losing. But I quite enjoyed it, and I am interested to get it to the table again because I'm a huge fan of Lord of the Rings. I love the movies, the books, and I managed to get my daughter interested in it too. We watched we watched the original trilogy, and then we're probably going to end up watching The Hobbit together. Even though it says, I think it's like a 14 plus game, it doesn't really matter. I think maybe they have to do that for legal reasons. But we played Cthulhu Death May Die together, and she quite liked it, and she understood how to play it, and she did quite well. So something like this, I think, would be more along the lines thematically of what she would be interested in. So I'm excited to try it out with her. And last but not least for the board games is Eldritch Horror. Now, this and Scythe are the only 2 games I haven't had a chance to actually play yet. Picking up 6 board games and a few expansions in 1 week, it really limits the amount of time you can concentrate on each game, so a few have been neglected, but I will get to them. And Eldritch Horror was one I've read about since I started looking into board games. The first board game I bought was Betrayal at House on the Hill, and it was because thematically horror games are something I'm very interested in. The horror theme in general is something I'm very interested in. I'm wearing a Cannibal Girls t-shirt right now. Cannibal Girls is an old Canadian horror film directed by Ivan Reitman. And so being able to kind of like immerse myself in this type of world with a board game is super exciting to me. The first game I got was Betrayal at the House on the Hill. And at the time, I had read that that was probably the most kind of like really engaging horror-themed game out there. But the problem is it's a 3-player game. And so before I actually looked at player counts, I picked that game up. And when I got it home, was totally frustrated with the fact that I had no one to play it with. My wife was working. My kids, I didn't think would probably be able to grasp a lot of what I needed them to grasp for that game since they had to read through scenario books. So something like this is probably better suited for me right now just because it does have a 1-player variant. It's actually just a 1 to 8 player game, so you could play with 1 player. I'm not too sure if it's 2-handed or how you have to do it. But now I always look at player counts or if there is a solo variant for these games because that's pretty much how I play them. So Eldritch Horror, not much more I can say about it since I actually haven't. I've opened it up and looked at the components, but I haven't gotten it to the table. But it's something I'm going to be looking forward to this week. And that's it for the board games. And other than that, I picked up these three kind of like mini expansions or hero packs, I guess, and then a villain pack for Marvel Champions. And so Marvel Champions, you're just playing with cards. The villains have a deck of cards. You have a deck of cards, and you just pretty much fight. It's very straightforward, and it's really enjoyable. And my buddy Andy, who is the one who kind of got me into terraforming Mars and suggested this whole solo board game thing, has gone through all of Marvel Champions. He has every single thing that has been released, and he started talking to me about it. And so I picked it up, and I also fell in love with it right away. It's such an engaging game. It's very easy to learn, and of course, extremely difficult to master. But every time I've played it, I've enjoyed it, and I find it's thematically, obviously, if you're into superheroes, it's a lot of fun. I grew up reading comic books. I watched all the movies. I'm a big fan of Guardians of the Galaxy, so the fact that there's a Star-Lord hero deck and now a Gamora one and a Drax one coming out, I was very excited about that, and I picked it up. And I'm still learning the game itself, so being able to master Star-Lord or master Doctor Strange in regards to how they play versus heroes from the core box like Spider-Man or Captain Marvel. I don't get it yet, but I'm getting there. The same thing with Arkham Horror. Arkham Horror compared to Marvel Champions is just brutal. It is extremely challenging, extremely hard, and when you lose, you really do feel like a failure because the scenarios in this are a lot more elaborate in regards to the Marvel Champions. Marvel Champions, you just set yourself up a villain and play through whatever scheme they have on the board. Whereas Arkham Horror, it's kind of like a storyline that you're playing through, right? You're playing through different chapters of this story, and in the core box, there's three, and then in this mini expansion, it's just one. But this has a lot of variations, which I found interesting. And I like Arkham Horror, but I was kind of scared to dive right into one of the big box expansions because that's quite a commitment. You get a big box that has two chapters, and then you have to also pick up the 6 Mythos decks that kind of continue the storyline because in total there's 8 chapters to each kind of big box expansion. And I thought that was a bit much just at first because I'm still not too sure how much I like this game. I do like it, but I feel like if I'm going to commit to one of those big box expansions, I should probably love it. So for now, I just picked up one of the mini expansions and I was quite happy with it. It was challenging, just like the core set. And the fact that there are so many different possibilities, because in this story, you are investigating a murder at a hotel, and depending on which leads you collect first, it leads you in a different direction. And so there, I think, are a total of 10 different directions you could go in with this basic story. And so I found that was for a mini expansion, a lot of gameplay in there. And so in the end, after a week of running around the city and collecting games, and probably the only reason that I actually stopped buying games, I'd like to think that it was because I have a bit more self-restraint, but it's actually because Lee went out of town with the car, and so I haven't been able to get around as much. But after one week, 6 board games, 4 little expansions, I think it's enough to keep me busy for a little while, hopefully. Obviously, I spend too much time online reading about new games that are coming out or taking a look at the used game boards, and I see so many possibilities for my collection. But I'm going to put a pin in it for now and spend a bit more time with each of these because I'm very excited to try out Eldritch, to play Lord of the Rings again, and to get Scythe to the table. I think Scythe is going to take a lot of my time and a lot of my effort, and I'm really excited for it because it's just so far just looking at the box and taking a look at some videos online. It's just such a interesting looking game, and I really want to play around with those minis. I love minis. Other than my obsession with board games, I'm also very much obsessed with minis, and I started painting a few. So that's going to be another video probably I'm going to make soon enough. Is I have oh, there's actually one game I forgot. So I'm not sure if this counts since I ordered it at the beginning of the month and it only arrived this week, but I totally forgot about it because I had put it over there on my shelf. But Marvel United. Everyone's been talking about the Kickstarter for Marvel United X-Men. I think it's the highest grossing Kickstarter ever for a board game. They topped something like 8 million. I may be wrong about that, but it was something like that. And so I had ordered this at the beginning of the month. It just arrived. So that's 7 board games instead of 6. Maybe I did go too far. If I would have stopped at 6, I think that would have been reasonable. 7 was a bit too far. But talking about minis, I have these minis already primed and ready to paint over there. And I had promised my daughters that I would paint them this week, but I haven't had a chance to do that because I've been making so many of these videos. But I'm going to try and get to one or two of them. But there's the Red Skull, Ultron, and Taskmaster. They're the three villains that come with the core set, and so they're over there waiting for me to paint them. And when I get around to that, I'll also make a video to show you how this obsession has gone from board games to mini figures to also 3D printing. I also grabbed the 3D printer, and so there was a time when I was making components for some of these games. And that time was obviously recent because I've only been doing this now for a few months. But yeah, I'd totally forgotten about this. So there we go. 7 new board games, 4 new expansions added to the collection this week. It's probably a good idea to do a weekly episode about the games coming into my collection or leaving my collection. That is, if I do have games going one way or the other each week. So moving forward, you might see a bit more of that. And I think being able to talk about the reasons why something really grabs me or something doesn't really pique my interest the way I thought could be interesting for other people as well. So that's going to be something that I spend a bit more time on moving forward. But for now, I think I'm going to say goodbye and I'll see you next time.